on the night of our 40th wedding anniversary. I wore a soft blue gown with pearl earrings and a silver bracelet David gave me years ago. The house was glowing, candles lit, music playing, guests laughing. I had spent weeks planning the party. The caterers were on time, the flowers were fresh, and the wine was flowing. Everyone kept saying, 40 years, that's amazing. I smiled, hugged old friends, and tried to ignore the strange feeling in my chest. David was standing near the fireplace, talking to Melissa. She was one of our mutual friends, someone I had known for years. She wore a red dress that clung too tightly, and her laugh was louder than usual. I noticed how close they stood, how her hand lingered on his arm. I told myself not to overthink it. It was a party. People were happy, that's all. Then David clinked his glass. "Can I have everyone's attention?" he said, smiling. I walked over, expecting a toast. Maybe something sweet. Maybe something about our journey together. Instead, he said, "I've decided to start a new life." He turned to Melissa and hugged her. Then he handed me a white envelope. Divorce papers. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I just stared at the papers, then at him, then at Melissa, who looked away. I signed them with red eyes and a heavy heart. I placed the pen down, walked to our bedroom, packed a small bag, and left the house at midnight. No one stopped me. No one followed. I walked down the quiet street, heels clicking on the pavement, the night air sharp against my skin. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. I found a small apartment the next day. 1 bedroom, 1 window, 1 broken heater. It smelled like dust and silence. I sat on the floor with my bag beside me and cried for the first time. Not because I lost a husband, but because I had wasted 40 years on someone who didn't see me. I didn't eat much that week, just coffee and toast. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't answer calls. I just stared at the ceiling and thought, what now? Then one morning, I picked up a pen and started writing in an old journal I had carried with me. I wrote everything: how David used to ignore me, how Melissa would always linger around, how I had stopped being a wife and become a shadow. And then I wrote one line that changed everything. They toasted my ending. I'll design their reckoning. Before I go on, I want to ask you watching this, please comment below and tell me from which city you're watching our channel. We love seeing how far our stories travel down now. Let me tell you what happened next. I started walking every morning, not for exercise but to clear my head. I passed by coffee shops, bookstores, dog parks. I watched people live. I watched women laugh. I watched old couples hold hands. And I thought, I deserve that. I went to the thrift store and bought a few things for the apartment: a kettle, a rug, a small mirror. I hung a photo of myself from my younger days on the wall, just to remind myself that I had once been full of life. Then I started attending small community events, book readings, art shows, charity drives. I didn't talk much. I just observed. And that's when I saw them again. David and Melissa. They were at a fundraiser. Smiling, holding hands, acting like they were the perfect couple. People were congratulating them. Some even said, "You both look so happy together." I stood in the corner, sipping coffee, watching. Melissa saw me. Her smile faded for a second. Then she turned away. I didn't react. I just walked out quietly. But that night, I made a plan. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to show them what dignity looks like. I started collecting things: photos, messages, dates. I remembered the times Melissa had come to our house when I wasn't home. I remembered the way David had started dressing differently, speaking differently, laughing more when she was around. I wasn't crazy. I had seen it all. I just hadn't wanted to believe it. Now, I believed. I called a few mutual friends and invited them to a dinner. I told them I was healing, moving on, and wanted to reconnect. They were happy to hear from me. I even invited David and Melissa. They said yes. I spent the next week preparing, not just food, but a presentation. I gathered old photos from our marriage, birthdays, anniversaries, vacations. Then I added recent photos: David and Melissa at events, at cafes, even one where they were holding hands before the divorce. I didn't write captions. I didn't add drama. I just let the pictures speak. The night of the dinner, I wore a deep green dress. My hair was tied back. My earrings matched my smile. I greeted everyone warmly, served food, laughed, and acted like nothing had ever happened. Then, after dessert, I said, "I'd like to share something." I turned on the projector. The slideshow began. At first, people smiled at the old photos. Then they grew quiet, then confused, then uncomfortable. Melissa shifted in her seat. David looked pale. I ended the slideshow with a simple line. Thank you for being part of my journey. I just wanted you to know when it ended. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just smiled and walked out of the room. Because that was the beginning of my revenge. The dinner ended in silence. I didn't wait for reactions. I walked out with my coat over my shoulders, my head high, and my heart steady. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights off. Just the glow from the street lamp outside spilling through the window. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just sat there, letting the quiet wrap around me like a blanket. I had done what I came to do. I had shown them the truth. The next morning, I woke up early and went for my usual walk. The air was crisp, the sidewalks damp from last night's rain. I passed the bakery on 3rd Street and bought a small cinnamon roll, not to celebrate, just to remind myself that sweetness still existed. I sat on a bench near the park and watched people pass by. A young couple jogging together, a woman walking her dog, a man helping his elderly mother into a car. Life was moving, and so was I. Later that day, I received a message from one of the dinner guests. Her name was Karen. She had been a friend of Melissa's, but she messaged me privately. I didn't know. I'm sorry. You were so composed last night. I admire you. I replied with a simple thank you. Then another message came, and another. Women who had seen the slideshow, who had watched me stand tall, started reaching out. Some shared their own stories. Some just wanted to say they were proud of me. I didn't expect it. I didn't plan for it, but it felt good. A few days later, I saw Melissa at a boutique downtown. She was alone, flipping through dresses. I walked past her without stopping, but she saw me. She hesitated, then walked over. Linda, she said, her voice soft. Can we talk? I looked at her. Her makeup was perfect, her clothes expensive, but her eyes were tired. I don't think there's anything left to say, I replied. She nodded slowly. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. I raised an eyebrow. You didn't mean to hug my husband in front of our guests, or you didn't mean to meet him behind my back for months. She looked down. I was lonely. I didn't laugh. I didn't scream. I just said, so was I, but I didn't steal someone's life to fix mine. She didn't respond. I walked away. That evening, I sat with my journal again. I wrote everything down, not just what happened but how I felt. I wrote about the betrayal, the silence, the strength it took to walk out. And I wrote about the dinner, the slideshow, the moment the room went quiet. I wrote one line in bold. Truth doesn't need volume. It just needs light. The next week, I received a call from a local women's group. They had heard about my dinner from one of the guests. They asked if I would come speak at their next gathering. I hesitated. I wasn't a speaker. I wasn't used to microphones or stages, but I said yes. The event was held in a small community hall. About 30 women sat in folding chairs, sipping coffee, waiting. I stood at the front, holding my journal, heart pounding. I didn't give a speech. I just told my story. I told them about the anniversary, the envelope, the midnight walk, the apartment, the dinner, the slideshow. I told them how I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I just showed the truth. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then everyone? Afterwards, women came up to me, hugging me, thanking me. One said, "You gave me courage." Another said, "I thought I was alone." I realized something that day. My revenge wasn't just for me. It was for every woman who had been silenced, ignored, replaced. I started attending more events, not as a guest but as a voice. I shared my story again and again, and every time, someone new came up and said, "Me too." I wasn't famous. I wasn't viral, but I was heard. One evening, I received a call from David. I didn't answer. He called again the next day, then sent a message. "I made a mistake. I miss you. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. Instead, I made tea, sat on my balcony, and watched the city lights. I thought about all the years I had spent cooking his favorite meals, ironing his shirts, waiting for him to come home. I thought about the way he had looked at Melissa that night, like I was invisible. And I thought about the dinner, the slideshow, the silence. I didn't want him back. I wanted peace. If you're still watching this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories like this, stories of quiet strength, truth, and dignity. And tell us, have you ever turned pain into power? We'd love to hear your story. After that message from David, I didn't sleep much. I wasn't angry. I wasn't tempted. I was just unsettled. It's strange how someone can break you, and then try to walk back in like nothing happened. Like the damage was temporary. Like your heart is a room they can rent again. I didn't reply. Instead, I made myself a strong cup of coffee and sat by the window. The city was waking up, cars humming, dogs barking, someone yelling at a delivery guy. I watched it all like a movie. Detached.com. That morning, I got a call from Karen again. She said, "Linda, I've been thinking, you should host something, a gathering, not for them, for us." I asked us. She said, "Women like you, women like me, women who've been through it and didn't fall apart." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the steam rising from my mug. Then I said, "Okay." We picked a date, 2 weeks from now, a Saturday evening. I booked the community room at the library. Nothing fancy, just a space with chairs, a projector, and a coffee machine. I called a few women I'd met at the fundraiser, a few from the dinner, a few who had messaged me after hearing my story. I told them it wasn't a support group, it wasn't therapy, it was just a space to talk, to listen, to be. They said yes. I spent the next few days preparing not just the room, but myself. I bought a new blouse. I printed a few photos. I wrote down a few thoughts. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just wanted to show up fully. The night of the gathering, I arrived early. The room smelled like old books and fresh coffee. I set out chairs in a circle. I placed a small vase of daisies on the table. I laid out napkins and cookies. Simple things, human things. By 6:30, the room was full. There were about 20 women, different ages, different stories. Some came alone, some brought friends, some looked nervous, some looked ready. I stood up and said, "Thank you for coming. I don't have a speech, I just have a story." And I told it again. The anniversary, the envelope, the midnight walk, the apartment, the dinner, the slideshow. I told them how I didn't scream, I didn't fight, I just showed the truth. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then someone clapped, then another, then everyone. Then the stories began. One woman said her husband left her for his coworker after 25 years. Another said her best friend betrayed her during a custody battle. Another said she had never been married, but had been used and discarded more times than she could count. We didn't cry. We didn't pity each other. We just listened. And something shifted. We weren't victims. We were witnesses. We were warriors. After the gathering, Karen hugged me and said, "You started something." I smiled. I just opened a door. The next day, I received a message from Melissa. "I heard about your group. I hope it helps you heal." I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote, "Healing isn't a destination, it's a decision." That week, I got a call from a local podcast host. She had heard about the gathering and wanted to interview me. I said yes. We met at a small studio downtown. She asked me questions about the dinner, the slideshow, the group. I answered honestly. She said, "You're very composed." I said, "I've had practice." The episode aired the following week. I didn't expect much, but suddenly, my inbox was full. Women from other cities, women from other states, women who had never met me but felt like they knew me. One message said, "I watched my husband fall in love with my best friend. I thought I was going crazy. Your story reminded me I'm not." Another said, "I've never told anyone what happened to me, but after hearing you, I think I'm ready." I didn't know what to do with all of it, so I kept writing, I kept walking, I kept showing up. One afternoon, I was at the grocery store when I saw David. He was standing in the frozen food aisle, looking older, thinner. He saw me and smiled. "Linda," he said, walking over, "you look good." I nodded. "I feel good." He hesitated. "I've been thinking about everything, about us." I didn't speak. He said, "I made a mistake." I looked at him. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice." He looked down. "Melissa and we're not together anymore." I didn't flinch. He said, "I miss you." I said, "I don't miss being invisible." He looked stunned. I smiled. "Take care." David and I walked away. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of iced tea and watched the sunset. The sky was pink and gold, soft and quiet. I thought about the woman I used to be, the woman who planned anniversary parties and waited for love to be returned. And I thought about the woman I had become. I didn't need a toast. I had a voice. If you're still watching this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories like this, stories of quiet strength, truth, and dignity. And tell us, have you ever found your voice after being silenced? We'd love to hear your story. After running into David at the grocery store, I didn't feel shaken. I felt confirmed. He looked smaller somehow, not just physically but in presence. The man who once filled a room with his voice now stood in front of frozen peas, fumbling for words. And when he said he missed me, I didn't feel flattered. I felt free. I walked away without guilt. That night, I sat in my apartment with a bowl of soup and my journal open beside me. I wrote, "Closure isn't a conversation, it's a decision." The next morning, I got a call from the library. They said the women's group wanted to meet again, not just once a month, every 2 weeks. I agreed. We called it the Circle. No formal name, just a space where women could show up and be real. At our next gathering, the room was fuller. Some women brought their daughters, some brought their journals, some just brought their silence. And that was okay. I didn't lead, I just opened the door. One woman, Diane, shared how her husband had left her after she was diagnosed with breast cancer. Another, Marcia, said her partner had drained her savings and disappeared. A younger woman named Tasha said she'd never been married, but had been cheated on by every man she'd ever trusted. We didn't offer advice, we offered presence. And that was enough. After the meeting, Karen pulled me aside. "You know what you did at that dinner? That slideshow? That was genius." I smiled. It wasn't revenge, it was truth. She nodded. Same thing, sometimes. That weekend, I received an invitation to a charity gala. It was hosted by one of the same couples who had attended my anniversary party. I hesitated. I didn't want to be around David or Melissa, but something inside me said, go. So I did. I wore a navy blue dress with a silver shawl. Nothing flashy, just elegant. I arrived alone, parked my car, and walked into the ballroom like I belonged there because I did. The room was full of familiar faces. Some smiled, some looked away, some whispered. I didn't care. I got myself a drink, found a quiet corner, and watched. Then I saw Melissa. She was standing near the bar, talking to someone I didn't recognize. Her hair was perfect, her dress expensive, but her posture was stiff. She didn't look happy, she looked tired. She saw me. I nodded politely. She walked over. "Linda," she said, her voice low. "I didn't expect to see you here." I sipped my drink. "I live here. I show up." She looked down. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry." I didn't respond. She continued, "David and we didn't last. It wasn't what I thought it would be." I raised an eyebrow. "That's unfortunate." Asterisk, she hesitated. "I think about that night. The dinner? The photos?" I felt exposed. I nodded. "Truth does that." She looked at me. "You were so calm." I smiled. I had already left the storm. She didn't know what to say. She just stood there, holding her clutch like it was a shield. I said, "Melissa, I don't hate you. I just don't carry you anymore." She blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not dragging your choices behind me. I'm walking forward." She nodded slowly. "I hope you find peace." I already did. She walked away. I finished my drink and left early. That night, I didn't journal. I didn't reflect. I just slept. Deeply, peacefully. The next day, I got a call from a local college. One of the professors had heard about the Circle and wanted me to speak to her class, young women studying psychology and social work. I said yes. I stood in front of 20 students and told my story. Not the dramatic parts, just the honest ones. I told them how betrayal doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes with silence, with a hug in public, with an envelope at a party. They listened. They asked questions. They thanked me. One student said, "You didn't just survive, you transformed." I smiled. That's the goal. After the class, I walked through campus, watching students rush between buildings, laughing, texting, living. I felt old but not invisible. I felt wise. That evening, I hosted another Circle meeting. This time, we had a theme. What I know now. Each woman shared one truth she had learned through pain. I know now that love without respect is just decoration. I know now that silence can be louder than words. No, now that I'm enough. When it was my turn, I said, "I know now that revenge doesn't have to be cruel. It can be quiet. It can be graceful. It can be a slideshow." The room laughed softly, not mockingly, just knowingly. After the meeting, I sat alone for a while, watching the last few women leave. Karen came over and said, "You've changed, Linda." I looked at her. "I've returned." She nodded. "To yourself." "Exactly. If you're still watching this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories like this, stories of quiet strength, truth, and dignity. And tell us, have you ever reclaimed yourself after being broken? We'd love to hear your story. The circle kept growing. What started as a quiet gathering of 20 women turned into a movement. Every 2 weeks, the room filled with new faces, some smiling, some guarded, all carrying stories. We didn't advertise. We didn't post flyers. Word just spread. One woman told another, and another, and another. I began to recognize the look. The one that said, "I've been through something, and I don't know how to say it." It was in the way they held their purses close. The way they scanned the room before sitting down. The way they exhaled when someone else spoke first. We didn't fix each other. We witnessed each other, and that was enough. One evening, after a particularly emotional meeting, I stayed behind to clean up. Karen helped me stack chairs while Diane wiped down the coffee table. Tasha folded the napkins, humming softly. Karen looked at me and said, "You know, you could turn this into something bigger." I paused. Bigger? She nodded. A nonprofit, a podcast, a book. People need this. I smiled. I'm not sure I'm ready for all that. She shrugged. You don't have to be ready, you just have to be willing. That night, I sat on my balcony with a notebook and a pen. I didn't write a business plan. I wrote a list: keep showing up, keep telling the truth, keep the door open. That was my mission. The next week, I received an email from a local women's shelter. They had heard about the circle and wanted to collaborate. They asked if I could host a workshop for women transitioning out of abusive relationships. I said yes. The workshop was held in a small room with pale green walls and folding chairs. The women were quiet at first. Some had bruises, some had scars you couldn't see. I didn't give a speech. I just told my story, and then I asked them to tell theirs. One woman said, "He told me I was lucky he chose me." Another said, "I stopped recognizing myself in the mirror." Another whispered, "I haven't spoken in a group in years." We sat in that room for 2 hours. No one checked their phones. No one looked away. We were present. We were real. Afterwards, the shelter director hugged me and said, "You didn't just speak, you gave permission." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. That weekend, I hosted another circle meeting. This time, we had a guest speaker, a therapist named Rachel who specialized in emotional recovery. She spoke about boundaries, about rebuilding identity, about the difference between forgiveness and permission. She said, "Forgiveness is for you. Permission is what you stop giving to people who hurt you." The room was silent. Then I said, "I stopped giving permission the night I walked out." Karen clapped. Others followed. After the meeting, Rachel pulled me aside. "You're doing something powerful here." I smiled. "I'm just telling the truth," she said. "That's the most powerful thing of all." The next day, I received another message from David. "I saw your interview. You've changed." I stared at the screen. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote, "Change isn't a makeover, it's a return." That evening, I went to a dinner hosted by one of our old friends, Susan. She had been at the anniversary party. She had seen the slideshow. She had stayed quiet now. She greeted me with warmth. "Linda," she said, hugging me, "I've been meaning to tell you, that night changed me." I raised an eyebrow. "How so?" she said. "I realized how many things I've let slide, how many times I've stayed quiet. You reminded me that silence isn't always noble." I nodded. "Sometimes it's just fear dressed up as grace." She smiled. "Exactly. The dinner was lovely. No drama, just conversation, just connection." On the way home, I drove past the house I used to live in. The porch light was on. The curtains were drawn. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel nostalgic. I just felt done. That chapter was closed. Back at my apartment, I made tea and sat by the window. The city was quiet. The air was cool. I thought about all the women who had walked into the circle and left a little taller. I thought about the ones who hadn't spoken yet. I thought about the ones who never would. And I thought about myself. I wasn't just healing, I was leading. If you're still watching this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories like this, stories of quiet strength, truth, and dignity. And tell us, have you ever led others by simply being honest? We'd love to hear your story. 1 year passed. It didn't feel like a year. It felt like a lifetime. Like I had crossed a bridge and burned it behind me, not out of anger, but out of necessity. The circle was now more than a gathering. It was a community. We had a small website, a newsletter, even a volunteer team. Women from all over the state reached out. Some came in person. Some joined online. Some just read the stories and whispered, "Me too." I didn't become famous. I didn't want to, but I became known. And more importantly, I became whole. One afternoon, Karen called me and said, We should celebrate. Not just the anniversary of the circle. But you? I laughed. Celebrate me, she said. Yes. You started this. You changed lives. You deserve a toast. I hesitated. Then I said, okay. But only if we make it about all of us. We booked a small event space downtown. Nothing fancy, just warm lighting, soft music, and a table full of food made by the women themselves. Pasta, casseroles, pies, salads. Every dish had a story. Every woman had a voice. I wore a deep burgundy dress with a gold pendant. My hair was curled softly, my smile steady. I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. As the room filled, I looked around and saw faces I had come to love. Diane, who had started painting again. Tasha, who had enrolled in college. Marcia, who had finally opened her own bakery. Karen, who had become my sister in spirit. I stood up and raised my glass. Thank you, I said, not just for being here, but for being brave, for showing up, for telling the truth. The room was quiet. I continued. 1 year ago, I was handed divorce papers at my own anniversary party. I walked out of a house I had built, into a life I hadn't planned. I didn't know what would happen. I just knew I couldn't stay silent. I paused. And now, here we are. Not broken, not bitter, just real. I raised my glass higher. 2 endings that became beginnings. Everyone clinked glasses. Some cried, some laughed, some just closed their eyes and breathed. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. After the toast, we shared stories, not just of pain but of joy, of rediscovery, of small victories. One woman said, I finally slept through the night. Another said, I danced in my kitchen for the first time in years. Another whispered, I told him no and meant it. We didn't need applause, we needed each other. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned and the music softened, I stepped outside for air. The city was quiet. The breeze was cool. I looked up at the stars and thought, I made it. Then I heard a voice behind me. Linda. I turned. It was David. He looked older. His hair was grayer, his posture less confident. He held a small envelope in his hand. I heard about tonight, he said. I wanted to say something. I didn't speak. He handed me the envelope. It's not much, just a letter. I didn't know how else to say it. I took it, but didn't open it. He said, I was wrong. About everything. About you. About us? I nodded. Yes, you were. He looked down. I thought I was chasing happiness, but I was just running from myself. I said, and you ran through me to do it. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry. I looked at him. I forgave you a long time ago, but that doesn't mean I want you back. He nodded. I understand. I said, I'm not the woman who waited for you to come home. I'm the woman who built a new one. He smiled faintly. You look happy. I am. He turned to leave, then paused. I hope you keep helping people. I will. He walked away. I stood there for a moment, holding the envelope. Then I placed it in my purse and went back inside. The room was still glowing. Karen waved me over. Diane handed me a slice of pie. Tasha pulled me into a photo. We laughed. We danced. We lived. That night, I didn't read the letter. I didn't need to. I already knew who I was. If this story touched you, don't forget to like and subscribe to Velvet Revenge. Your support helps us share more stories like this, stories of quiet strength, truth and dignity. And tell us, have you ever raised a toast to your own comeback? We'd love to hear your story.